Alright, to do a pre-trip, what you must do before you get your tester out is open your side box, which is the yellow button located inside the driver's door. Make sure your truck is chocked. While I'm doing that, I want to let you know that your DVD of the pre-trip will not teach you a pre-trip. It's a teaching aid to help you with it. Watch it once or twice and come out here and put your DVD into action and learn your pre-trip that way. Don't learn your pre-trip by watching TV. We'll make sure both sides of the truck is unhooked. Then you'll go to the building, get your tester. Your tester will come out. First thing you're going to do is let your tester know your truck is chocked. The key is in your hand. You're placing it in your pocket for security. You'll check the overall appearance of your vehicle to make sure it's not leaning to the left or to the right. If we're leaning, it could be a flat tire, busted shock, a broken spring, or a shifted motor. You'll start at the top with your marker lights on either end of the tractor, making sure they're not cracked, broken, or missing. You'll check your 3 identification lights, making sure they're not cracked, broken, or missing. Come down and check your windshield. Checking your windshield for cracks. Cracks can be stickers or a glade. Come down and check your windshield wipers, making sure they're in place, and we'll check them again later on in our pre-trip. Checking your fender mirror, making sure your fender mirror is properly mounted and secured to the truck and the glass is in place. Then you're going to come down and check your parking light, your headlight, your turn signal, making sure none are cracked, broken, or missing. You'll check up under your vehicle for any leaks. Green would be coolant, red would be power steering or transmission fluid, black would be oil. Then you'll open your hood. It is easier to open your hood from the side. You go to the passenger side of the truck, check your motor compartment. And I like to keep things in order, so I start top to bottom, left to right. So I'm going to check my alternator first, make sure all my nuts and bolts are in place. Make sure my hoses aren't, my wires are not cracked or frayed. Check my belt, make sure my belt's not cracked or frayed and has no more than 3/4 inches of play. I want to check my water pump, which is right underneath it, making sure that it's properly mounted and secure and not leaking. Anytime you talk about a part that has an air, water, or a fluid in it not leaking, must be in your phrase, otherwise you will not get that point. And again, you will check that belt for no more than 3/4 inches of play, not cracked, frayed, or missing. Come over here, all you have to do is touch your dipstick and tell her that you are checking your oil level. You do not have to pull that out. Okay? You must touch all your parts on your pre-trip. If you're not touching them, you're not getting the point. On the driver's side of your motor, again, it's top to bottom, left to right. First thing you're going to see is your coolant level. Your coolant level must be at proper operating level. The next thing in line would be your air compressor right here. And this is a gear-driven air compressor. There is no belt on there. And you must announce that. Checking my air compressor, make sure it's properly mounted and secure. This is a gear-driven compressor, and I like to check my hoses and make sure they're not cracked, frayed, or leaking. And then I'll move on to my steering system. We'll break it down and make it easy. I'm going to talk about my steering arm being properly mounted and secure, all nuts and bolts in place. Come over here and I'm going to check my power steering reservoir, making sure it's proper operating level. I'm going to check my power steering box, make sure all my nuts and bolts are in place and it is not leaking. The fluid does run in there, so not leaking must be part of that phrase. Here's your pitman arm for your steering linkage. It must be properly mounted and secure with a castle nut and a cotter key. This here is your drag link. It's part of your steering linkage. You must check it, make sure it's properly mounted and secure, again with a castle nut and a cotter key. Now we're going to move on to our suspension. In our suspension, we're going to check our spring mount, making sure it's properly mounted and secure. We're going to check our springs and make sure our springs are properly mounted and secure, not broken, shifted no more than 1/4 of an inch, or missing. Then we'll come back here to our U-bolts. Our U-bolts must be properly mounted and secure. Our shock must be properly mounted and secure. No present damage, not leaking. These are a gas shock. We'll move on to our brakes. Our brakes consist of our brake hose, properly mounted and secure. The brake hose cannot be cracked, frayed, or leaking. Brake chamber must be properly mounted and secure, banded properly and not leaking. This is our slack adjuster. Our slack adjuster can have no more than 1 inch of play in it. Our brake shoe, which is inside, must have at least 1/4 inch of lining. Our brake drum cannot be crack pitted or have any grease or oil present. Then we'll come on to our tire. Our tire, we're checking the inside and outside wall for abrasions, bulges, and cuts. We're checking the inside and outside wall for a good seal to the rim. We're checking the top of the tire for 4 30-second tread depth, 100 pounds of pressure. Being this is a front steer tire, cannot be a recap. Now we're going to check the rim on the inside and the out for any cracks, dents, or illegal welds. We're going to check our lug nuts, making sure they're all properly mounted and secure, good and tight. A rust streak would indicate a loose lug. You would tighten that lug and then the remaining lugs around it. This is a hub oil seal up under here. You do not have to take that off during your test, but you will tell her you check your oil hub seal. Make sure it's at proper operating level and not leaking. I'm going to check my splash guard right here, make sure it's properly mounted and secure. I'm going to come on over here to my door mirror, make sure my door mirror is properly mounted and secure and the glass is in place, not cracked, broken, or missing. I'm going to check my door to make sure that it opens and closes properly and that my hinges are in line. I'll come down to my fuel cell. I'm going to check my fuel cell and make sure my saddle straps have rubber gaskets under them. The rubber gaskets are to prevent metal to metal friction. I'm going to check my fuel cell cap. You do not have to take this off during your test. I'm just letting you see what I'm talking about. You must have a safety chain and a rubber gasket. And it must be on the truck secure while you're in motion. I'll then check up underneath my fuel cell for any leaks. I'll come to my driver's side box. In my driver's side box, I must have a fully charged 10 BC fire extinguisher, 3 reflective triangles, spare bulbs, and fuses for everyone that this truck requires. Never pass a light without checking it while you're on the road. I'm checking this light right here, making sure it's not cracked, broken, or missing, and it is in working condition. That light reminds me of a light up on my bulkhead, and I'm going to check it and make sure that it's not cracked, broken, or missing. When you get in between your truck and your trailer, your voice must raise so that she can hear you. Again, it's top to bottom, left to right. The first thing I'm going to see is my exhaust. I'm checking my exhaust to make sure that it's properly mounted and secured to the vehicle. I'm going to look underneath the vehicle to make sure that there is no black soot at any of the connections. That would indicate a leak. I'm now going to check my frame of my tractor in either direction, making sure that it's not bent, broken, been welded on, or any illegal drill holes. I'm now checking the back of my tractor to make sure all my rivets are in place. There is no dents or holes. I'm checking my emergency line and my emergency line is the red one. Service line is blue. I'm checking them at this connection here to make sure they're not leaking. Checking my electrical line here to make sure it's locked in place. I'm going to come down and check my catwalk, make sure my catwalk's properly mounted and secured to the vehicle. There's no debris on it. I'm checking my drive shaft underneath my catwalk. I'm checking it to make sure it's properly mounted and secured, and look for shiny spots. A shiny spot would indicate something dragging on it while you're in motion. Now I'm going to move on to my torsion bar. Make sure my torsion bar is properly mounted and secure. Now I'm going to move to the top of my trailer, and I'm looking at my bulkhead, which is the front of your trailer. Checking it for dents, making sure all my rivets are in place. And as I come down, I will check my service line, making sure there's rubber gaskets on my glad hands. I want to check my emergency line, making sure that I have rubber gaskets, good tight fit, no leaks. And my electrical line is locked in place. Now I'm going to do my brakes and suspension for this set of tires right here. I'm going to start with my brakes because they're the furthest inside. I'm checking my brake hose, making sure my brake hose is properly mounted and secure, not cracked, frayed, or leaking. I'm checking my brake chamber, make sure it's properly mounted and secure, banded properly, not leaking. I'm checking my slack adjuster to make sure I have no more than 1 inch of play on it. I'm checking my brake shoes to make sure my brake shoes have at least a 1/4 inch of lining on them. I'm checking my brake drum to make sure my brake drum is not cracked, pitted, or have any grease or oil present. Now I'll move on to suspension. I'm checking my spring mount. My spring mount must be properly mounted and secure, all nuts and bolts in place. I'm checking my springs. Make sure my springs are not cracked, broken, missing, or shifted any more than a 1/4 inch. I'm checking my U-bolts. Make sure my U-bolts are properly mounted and secure. And I'm checking my shock to make sure that my shock is properly mounted and secure, no present damage, not leaking. I'll come around here, checking my airbag. It's part of your suspension. It's properly mounted and secure, not leaking. Now I'll check my tires. Checking the inside and outside wall the same way I check the front for ABCs, abrasions, bulges, and cuts. Back here we need how much tread depth? 2 30-seconds. It's 4 30-seconds in the front, 2 30-seconds to the rear. 100 pounds of pressure. Good seal to the rim on the inside and the outside. My inside rim cannot be cracked, damaged, or welded on. These are bud rims. They do not require a spacer. However, I am checking the space in between my tires for any lodged debris. I'll move on to this tire. I'm checking it the same way I did the other. Inside and outside wall, no abrasions, bulges, and cuts. 2 30-seconds tread depth, 100 pounds of pressure. I'm going to check this splash guard before I move away from here to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or missing. Now I'm going to check this rim. I'm checking this rim to make sure it's not cracked and welded on or dented around the outside of the rim. Checking my lug nuts to make sure all my lug nuts are in place, properly mounted and secure. There are no rust streaks. A rust streak would indicate a loose lug. Tighten that lug and then the remaining lugs around it. This is an axle seal, different from up in the front. The front are hub seals. This is where you get your pulling power from. So if I was to take this off, it's a steel plate. There's no way of checking your level. What you're looking for is a leak around here. Okay? Now, up under my tractor, this is your kingpin apron up under here. You're checking it for any damage, cracks, dents, illegal welds. There can be no light between my kingpin apron and the platform of my fifth wheel. There can be no light right there. Now I'm checking my fifth wheel's overall appearance. Now I'll come over here and I'm going to check my release arm. My release arm is in the in-locked position. This release arm does not have a safety latch, but if it did, I would check that safety latch to make sure it's latched in place. I'm going to check my locking pin. This is the locking pin for my sliding fifth wheel. It must also be in the in-locked position. These are my sliding fifth wheel mounting bolts. They must all be present and tight. Now I'm going to move on to these brakes and suspension. It's kind of hard to see from this vantage point, but you can see your brake hose properly mounted and secure, not cracked, frayed, or leaking. Your brake chambers right here. Here's your band, properly mounted and secure, not leaking. Here's your slack adjuster, no more than 1 inch of play on that. And again, inside here, you have your brake shoes with a 1/4 inch of lining, and your brake drum cannot have no cracks, pits, grease, or oil presence. Then I'll move on to my suspension. Spring mounts, properly mounted and secured. Springs not cracked, broken, or shifted, no more than a 1/4 of an inch. My U-bolts,